Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, it's all about the post Karl-Anthony Towns injury Wolves offense. Yes, there's been some improvement in terms of pace, etc., but the shot selection hasn't been great. And they just need to play faster. We're going to dig into the numbers in the 6 games post Cat injury. It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Happy Thursday, everybody. Hopefully you're having a fantastic week. The Wolves are off again today, in action tomorrow night, Friday night, so against Cleveland and remain at home. Today, I want to take a step back and look at the Cat's been out for 2 weeks now. The Wolves have played 6 games. They're 3-3 in those games. And I had some declarations about how I thought the Wolves needed to play offense without Karl-Anthony Towns available. And they fulfilled some of them, kind of, but there's room for growth, clearly. Now, obviously, 6 games is a small sample, matchups matter, et cetera. We'll get into all that. But I want to look at some of the numbers of this small sample so far and see where the Wolves are trending offensively after the Karl-Anthony Towns injury from a couple weeks ago, or when he started missing games. I guess he's been hurt for a while, it sounds like, but at least in terms of when he stopped playing games due to the current injury and the knee surgery that he had last week. So lots to get to here today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Also, a reminder about the postcast. Not only do we cover your team every single day, but we're also giving you instant reaction episodes after every single game. Check out the Locked On Wolves postcast. You can find the audio right here on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed. You can also stream live after the games on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Again, rapid reaction to all the biggest moments of the Locked On Wolves postcast. The episode before this one in your audio feed is the Minnesota basketball party that we do every Wednesday with myself, Reggie Wilson of Care 11, Jack Borman of Canis Hoopus, editor-in-chief over there, and Ron Johnson of the Ron Johnson Show right here on Locked On and Locked On Sports Minnesota, hosted by Sam Ekstrom. So check that out. Again, Wednesdays, the video, YouTube usually premieres late morning, around lunchtime, and then the audio is usually up late afternoon on this feed on Wednesdays every week during the season. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the Timberwolves offense post Karl-Anthony Towns injury. And I'll start with what I declared a couple of weeks ago as something the Wolves would need to do. And that is play faster and shoot more threes. In other words, a higher variance style of offense. Now, first of all, I think those are both things that Chris Finch has been imploring the Wolves to do all season. So I want to be fair there. It's not like a novel concept. My point is that it's that much more important when you're missing your, I would say, most efficient, and I would also argue most versatile offensive weapon. Yes, Anthony Edwards is the most talented. He's the most athletic. He's the most dynamic offensive player on the Wolves. But Cat remains the most efficient. And because he's so good in so many areas, you can literally do anything with him and feel good about it. Now, you could argue the same for Ant, but they don't do everything with him, right? They don't run post-ups for Ant. Not that they do it that much for Cat anymore. But because of Cat's size, and he's such a good three-point shooter, it opens up the playbook. Now, the Wolves haven't run a ton of like actual actions through Karl-Anthony. I shouldn't say that they haven't. They have. They maybe didn't do it to the level that they should have earlier this year. And now they can't do it because Cat's not on the floor. So my argument has been the Wolves need to play faster. They need to shoot more threes. Another way of saying that is they need to play a higher variance style of offense because they have less talent on offense, right? They need to take bigger swings, which is push the pace because their defense is good enough, and they've had a good enough transition defense so far this year. And frankly, not having Karl-Anthony Towns actually helps your transition defense in most cases. He's been better this year, to be clear, but Cat is often the last one down the floor. He's not as good at getting back as even Rudy is. He tends to fall down a lot. Rudy doesn't. Those things do add up, and they do matter. So the transition defense has been pretty good all year, and certainly better than it was last year. And playing faster gives you more offensive possession. So when you're less efficient, that is helpful. And also shooting more threes is another high variance. It's a bigger swing, right? Yes, you're missing your best 3-point shooter, but you also are missing your best all around most efficient scorer. And as we'll see here in a minute, there's other things Cat does that you're now missing. And one of those is rim attempts, and following that is free throw attempts, right? So have the Wolves played faster, and have they shot more 3-point attempts since Karl-Anthony Towns went down? Let's start with the shot selections. Let me see if I can find I lost my pace here. I'm going to see if I can find where'd it go? Oh, well, I'll get back to it here in a second. All right, so shot selection wise, the Timberwolves for the season, so this includes, going all the way back to October, regardless of timing of Karl-Anthony Towns' injury, are, according to Cleaning the Glass, they're 8th in location effective field goal percentage. I've used this before, but I'll quickly cite what it is. It's if the team shot the league average field goal percentage from every location on the floor, what would their effective field goal percentage be? Okay. That gives us a sense of the team's shot profile, meaning what's the mix of shots? Are they shooting at the rim? Are they shooting threes? Are they shooting a bunch of mid-range? For the season, the Wolves are still 8th in location effective field goal percentage, according to Clean the Glass. They were top 5. I think they were number 1 for a little while. That's actually going in the wrong direction. They're 20th in 3-point rate, according to Cleaning the Glass. They're 9th in corner threes, which has gone down a little bit. They're 15th in mid-range jumpers, which is okay, but they're 3rd in short mid-range, and they're 27th in long mid-range, meaning they're shooting a bunch of short mid-range. But short mid-range is not the rim, right? Short mid-range is classified on Cleaning the Glass as 4 to 14-ish feet, basically 4 feet to the free throw line. The Wolves for the season are 3rd in those attempts, essentially paint attempts that aren't at the rim. They're 10th in rim attempts, which is good, and that's really what's kind of buoying this number up to 8th in location effective field goal percentage, okay? That's for the season. So top 10 in rim attempts, top 3 in short mid-range jumpers, 9th in corner threes. Those things are all good. Being, shooting 31% of your shots from the mid-range is not ideal. And the Wolves should be shooting more than 34% of their shots from 3-point range. Okay, but that's for the season. Since the Cat injury, it's only a 6-game sample, but the Wolves are just 24th in location effective field goal percentage. Why? Well, they're shooting a lot less at the rim. That's the number one reason. They are shooting more mid-range jumpers. Like, for instance, short mid-range jumpers on the season, they're shooting 24% of their shots from there. Since the Cat injury, they're shooting 27%. Long mid-range jumpers, for the season, they're shooting 6.7% of their shots from there. Since the Cat injury, they're shooting 9%. All mid-range jumpers for the season, they're shooting 31%. They're shooting 36.1% of their shots. So 5% more of their shot attempts are coming from the mid-range after the Cat injury. But they're not sacrificing threes. They're actually shooting slightly, ever so slightly more 3-pointers, which surprised me. I was expecting that number to be higher. And frankly, small sample, it was dragged down by the game the other night when they attempted 12 less threes than the opponent. I'm blanking on which game that was. I think that was, I can't remember. I think it was the game before the Nuggets game. But anyway, for the season, they're shooting 35.8% of their shots from 3. Since the Cat injury, they're shooting, I said that backwards. For the season, they're shooting 34% of their shots from 3, 34.5. Since the Cat injury, they're up to 35.8. So slightly more than about a 1.5%. A 1.5% more 3-pointers from outside the arc than they were before the Cat injury. So they're not sacrificing threes, they're sacrificing rim attempts. And that goes back to the point I was making a moment ago. For the season, the Timberwolves are shooting 34.5% of their shots from at the rim. Since the cat injury, they're shooting 28.1% of their shots at the rim. Now, I want to add the Rudy injury happened halfway through there. So Rudy's missed the last 3 games. So half of these games are sans Rudy too. So obviously rim attempts are going to go down. But you could isolate some of those games. And Rudy's the only guy, like, other than the occasional ant drive, nobody else is really shooting at the rim, right? Usage of guys that love to shoot in the mid-range has just skyrocketed. I want to talk a little bit about that next. And then I do want to get into talking about pace of play, talking about whether or not the Wolves are running enough. So we'll get to all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Do you ever wonder what adventure might be waiting around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class-exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. The Nissan's incredible lineup also features the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder, has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Of course, the big tournament starts today, but don't just fill out your bracket, because office bracket, school bracket, whatever, like family bracket, small potatoes, and you lose your bracket get busted right away, right? And one year I actually picked 15 of the 16 games in the first day right. That was my best year ever. Just in terms of first round. I've had other years where I did better later, but that first round was amazing. It's my favorite. One of my favorite days of the year, actually, is today. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Again, that's the best way to play March Madness. $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all for the tournament. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops all the way until they cut down the nets. Will you be watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Believe me, when I have it on, I do. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's talk quickly. Let's put a bow on the shooting shot distribution, we'll call it, right? The where the Wolves are shooting from post Karl-Anthony Towns injury. All right. So I talked a little bit about how the rim attempts are way down. Yes, that's partly due to Rudy's injury as well, but the cat injury is going to have a big impact on that. If you look at the percentage of Timberwolves shots at the rim, I mean, Gobert's number 1 and Ant's number 2, right? You take out Karl-Anthony Towns, and Cat also, I should say, is also short mid-range jumpers is a big impact there. But talk about the guys who are shooting the ball much more frequently since Karl-Anthony Towns went down. Kyle Anderson, Jaden McDaniels, to a lesser extent, Monte Morris. Their mid-range percentages, or at least the number of their shots that are coming from the mid-range, are really high. Kyle Anderson, 62% of his shot attempts are coming from the mid-range. Now, most of those are short mid-range within the free throw line, right? He's 100th percentile league-wide in terms of mid-range rate, if you will. Monte Morris, 41% of his shot attempts are coming from the mid-range. And that is 83rd percentile. Jaden McDaniels, 32%, so about 1 in 3 of Jaden's shots are coming from the mid-range. We talked about this a little on the basketball party on Wednesday, but that is a bit of an uptick. He's shooting less threes and more mid-range jumpers this year, Jaden McDaniels is. And then obviously Ant, who's also added more shots. He shoots from everywhere, right? Basically everywhere except corner threes. He did attempt one and he missed it the other night, but he's only 3% of Ant's shots this year come from the corners, according to cleaning the glass. But he shoots 39% of his shots from the mid-range, 31% from the rim, and he's seen his usage increase even more post Karl-Anthony Towns injury. So the Rudy impact is greater on the rim stuff, but Cat still matters there. And then we can also look at free throw rate. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that's the other thing that's going to be impacted by no Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean, you're talking about a guy who free throw rate wise, outside of Ant, got it right here. Well, Rudy, I guess, is number one. Ant is actually Kyle Anderson is number two on the Wolves in free throw rate, which remember, that's not free throw attempts per game. It's calculated based on its free throw attempts per field goal attempt. So someone doesn't attempt that many shots because of his herky-jerky shot motion, etc. He does draw a lot of fouls. Ant is next, and then it's Cat. So since Rudy's been out too, you're missing two of your top four guys in terms of drawing fouls. And without Cat, you're missing your fourth best at doing that, period. And if you want to look at volume as well, which matters here, I mean, him and Ant, right? Like those are the two guys who have the volume and get to the line, and you're missing half of that with Karl-Anthony Towns being out. So that matters too. I want to transition into talking about, transition offense. And what I said at the beginning of the show, which was, hey, not only do they need to shoot more threes, which they're doing marginally, they need to play faster. For the season, as a quick refresher, the Wolves are 29th in transition frequency, according to Cleaning the Glass, which is effectively pace. They're actually up to 25th on Basketball Reference, but Cleaning the Glass filters out garbage time and end of quarter possession, so that's going to be a more accurate number. Transition frequency for the season, the Minnesota Timberwolves are 29th, but they are number one. I talked about this extensively last week. I did basically a show on it. Number one in points per play in transition, or points per 100 plays in transition. So second to last in frequency, but first in efficiency in transition this season league-wide. This is for the season, okay? Off of steals, they're 21st in terms of frequency of running, but they're fifth in points per 100 plays. Off of rebounds, they're dead last in frequency of running. They only run after 21% of defensive rebounds. And they're sixth in points per play there. I've been imploring the Wolves to play faster, and they've done it comparatively to how they played this season. They're playing a lot faster, but there's a lot of room for growth. Overall transition over the last 6 games, post-Cat injury is 13.9% frequency, which is 19th in the league. So they went from 12.8% to 13.9%, but they've risen 10 spots in the league rankings. They're still second in success, though. Second in points per 100 plays in transition over the last 2 weeks. So they've made, even while they're slightly, albeit slightly, upgrading their frequency, their efficiency has remained. They're running 64% of the time off of steals, which is dead middle of the pack, 15th, and just under 26% of the time off of defensive rebounds, which is 19th. And that's where we've seen the biggest growth, right? From 21% to 25%. For context, for the season, the teams that run the most off of defensive rebounds, Toronto runs 38% of the time. They're first in overall pace, but they're 38% of the time. For context, the Wolves are running 22% of the time off of defensive rebounds. Now, I'm not saying the Wolves should play like Toronto, because Ant's an incredible half-court offensive player. But with no Cat, the offense loses some efficiency. It loses some floor stretchability. It loses some the ability to get to the line as well as it does with Cat. You lose some rim attempts. That's also a way to get more rim attempts, by the way, is playing faster, playing more in transition. Part of that's going to be not opponent specific, because you can run against anybody. But it's going to depend on the teams you're playing against and if you're able to run on them, right? Like there was some ability to run against Utah. It gets trickier against some of these opponents. Cleveland will be an interesting one. We'll talk a little bit about that actually on tomorrow's show. But for the most part, all I'm saying is the Wolves need to continue to increase the frequency of playing in transition, increase the frequency of three-point shots, and when possible, get to the rim more often. Naturally, there's going to be more 14-footers when you have Slow-Mo playing heavier minutes, when he's a starter, right? That's okay, as long as Ant's shot selection doesn't devolve. As long as, obviously you don't have like Nickeil Alexander-Walker shooting a higher frequency of 2-point of mid-range shots. I'm not super worried about that, but you have an increase in usage for slow-mo for McDaniels. Like, it's going to happen. Now, when Rudy comes back, which I would assume is going to be Friday, I shouldn't assume, but it sounded like he was close to playing Tuesday, and give him another 3 days off here. Hopefully he plays Friday. After missing it'll have been like about 9 days, he'll be out with the rib sprain. Your rim attempts are going to go up. Nas also helps with playing fast, and Nas missed the last game and a half. So, all the injuries certainly muck these numbers up a little bit, but I think it's so far enough to tell us, like, hey, they're trying to play faster. They're not sacrificing 3-point attempts. They are sacrificing rim attempts. So what can they do as a team to continue to improve this offense? And I should also say, since the cat injury, I mean, the offense they haven't played well overall. They're 3-3. I shouldn't say they haven't played well. They played well Tuesday in the game against Denver. They're 3-3 since the cat injury. They're 13th in offense and 14th in defense since the cat injury. So the offense has actually been better over the last 2 weeks, but the defense hasn't been better. I keep saying they're 3-3. They're 4-3. Go back to that Pacers game. It was the first game Cat missed. They're 4-3 over that period of time. The defense has slid. Remember, Rudy's missed a couple of games as well, but the offense has actually been pretty good. It's just, how can it be good enough here over the next couple of weeks to maintain that top 3 seed? I mean, we're only talking 14 more games, 13 more games. So crazy, but we're at that point in the season. All right, let's close with some quick ownership news. We'll peek ahead at the schedule. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let it all out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. Today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. And, it may seem trivial. Of course, mine is Wolves related, and it is related to Chris Finch. I don't think Chris Finch gets enough credit. And I know he's never won a playoff series. I get that. But there's been various coach rankings. There's been some national podcasts that have done coach rankings lately. And Tuesday's game is a great example of that. How much of being an NBA coach is motivating players and making sure your guys are ready to play each and every night. And Chris Finch does that. These guys were ready to play on Tuesday against the Nuggets, almost pulled out a win. Finch, well, he's a more hands-off, laid-back personality and has that hands-off coaching style. Clearly, he's pushing the right buttons with guys like Anthony Edwards, who is obviously a unique personality. Chris Finch has a great rapport with him. We know that. We know Ant and Finch love each other. We know Finch gets along with players in general and has cultivated a strong locker room. And the X's and O's matter, and he's done a good job there. But with a pro basketball team, how much of this is so much of it is relationships, it's culture, it's the day in and day out. Are these guys going to want to go into a game and battle for you? And the answer is yes. And to have this team where they are, and currently 4-3 post-cat injury, winning games without Rudy Gobert, taking the defending champs all the way down with those centers, taking a team with the best player who also happens to be a center to the final possession of the game with no centers available besides a two-way guy in Luka Garza. It underscores how good of a job Chris Finch has done this year. So that, it bothers me. He's not getting enough attention for that. Again, might seem trivial. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team. But hey, it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. And therapy looks different for everyone. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, let's close with a bit of ownership news. So when I mentioned on Wednesday's show that I was going to talk ownership news, it was more negative. Now it's more positive. It was reported on, I think, late Tuesday that one of the primary investors in the Wolves' new ownership group had dropped out. And as a quick refresher, Marc, Lori, and Alex Rodriguez purchased 20% of the team in 2021, 20% last year, and they're supposed to get their final 40% currently. So they are currently, or not currently, by the end of this month, they're currently 40% stakeholders in the Wolves. They were going to get another 40% to become the majority 80% shareholder. Glenn Taylor would then still have most of the remaining 20% and remain a minority owner. And Glenn Taylor, as Glenn Taylor does, said publicly the other day that the equity group that was going to put in $300 million in this next 40% withdrew, or the NBA denied them, he said. Then the NBA said they didn't deny them, so then it was kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Now, since then, I would say Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening, there was a report from Shams Charania and John Krasinski at The Athletic that Lori and Rodriguez had submitted the documentation that they needed to submit, that they found another investor. Apparently, the group that withdrew was Carlyle Group, and now they've got a new firm, the Dial Capital Partners. And then within that report, Shams and Rodriguez said that, it says league sources said that Carlyle, the initial private equity firm, was not able to agree to certain requirements the NBA makes of investors, so they mutually agreed that Carlyle would withdraw. So the NBA's statement that they did not deny Carlyle is apparently technically true. It was a mutual decision of, hey, this group, Carlyle, will not meet these requirements, so therefore we're going to bow out. But with a situation like this, of course, the headlines are going to be, this is Keystone Cops, but when you're making a business transaction of this magnitude, you've got some contingency plans. And it's also probably not all that hard. I know it sounds like it'd be hard to find $300 million. We're talking about an NBA investment. Like, NBA teams are worth a ton of money, and they're increasing in valuation all the time. So it's not shocking that they had a backup ready to go within effectively 24, 36 hours from when this was reported. So all the paperwork's been submitted, and the NBA just has to approve this new 40% stake, which includes this new Dial Capital Group, in addition to the rest of the Lori Rodriguez group. So if it all gets finalized by the end of March, this should be an 80% ownership stake for Lori and Rodriguez, just in time. I believe it all happens immediately. I don't think there's like I don't think it's like end of the year. I think it's now, when they would then become majority owners, just in time for the playoff run. So I don't know that there's actually, like, it's significant because it was a last minute shift, but I don't know that there's any impact here, and it's not negative news at this point. It's just kind of neutral news, but I wanted to kind of talk through that. But we should expect Lori and Rodriguez to take full control here very shortly. All right, peeking ahead, Friday night, the Wolves take on the Cavs at 7. That's an NBA TV game at Target Center. I'll preview that matchup on Friday's show, so we'll do that tomorrow. Then they're off Saturday, don't play again until Sunday, and then they're off 2 more days. They don't play again until Wednesday. So only 2 games between now and next Wednesday. Both home games, Cleveland and Golden State, obviously both winnable games, both good teams. Cleveland being one of the best teams in the league going back to the first of the year. And Donovan Mitchell has been in and out. He's currently out, and I'm pretty sure won't play Friday. I'll have to look through all that, but I don't think he's playing Friday. So certainly a winnable game, although the Wolves did lose in Cleveland in the second game post-cat injury. But remember, that was the overtime game the day after the Ant-Heroics in Indiana. So there was a lot going on there. I'll rehash some of that because it's so relevant on Friday's show, because that was only 2 weeks ago, Wolves-Cavs matchup. So we'll talk about that on Friday, among other things. Otherwise, that's all we have for you today. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves, and also at B Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the free Fire TV channels app. All right, that's all we have for you today. Remember, the Locked On Podcast Network is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and the Locked On Network is, of course, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.